What's up, podcast family? Welcome back to episode 3 of Boldly His podcast. We are your hosts, Megan Wilcox
and Faith Byler.
We are overcoming our mic issues.
It should be fixed soon. Today is it's a step in the right direction.
We at least have a mic connected today. This is one of our test mics. So if you see mics propped up, this is in fact the one that works, is the one that we're holding. Welcome back.
We are so excited. A little update. We've been a little bit MIA, the past month. I had labrum surgery on my shoulder, but we're back in business, except for I am going back to school next week. Yeah, we are back and better.
And we have to keep passing the microphone, so there's going to be some pauses here. Faith has been getting through with her surgery. I had the flu the week that she was overcoming her surgery. I also just started a new job, so we've just been busy with some other things, but don't think that we have forgot about this. We're still very committed to making this happen. We have so many topics that we want to talk about, and we've listed out. Today we're just kind of catching up with you guys, getting back into the groove of things. And I think we're going to chat a little bit today about how to find quality friendships. Because there are a lot of things that we can talk about in the relationship realm, but I think it's important to have a good community around you when getting into a relationship. So it's important to know what a good friendship and a good Christ-centered friendship looks like.
Yeah, I would say we both have had our own relationship experience with friendships and just friendship splitting up and knowing how to find godly community and where to look for that. So we're going to kind of touch on that a little bit today.
I would say as far as navigating finding good Christian friendships, there's not a rule book for how to make it work. And you can easily be deceived a lot, especially in college. Going into your freshman year when you're meeting a whole bunch of new people, it's really hard to take those first couple of weeks and actually know a person's true character. I mean, who actually is still friends with the people they meet their first week of freshman year. It's definitely uncommon.
A majority of my friends actually came from softball. I grew up playing softball. Softball is a huge part of my life. I met many amazing people. Exhibit A through softball. So that was a huge blessing. And I think that God really used the sport of softball to introduce me to different people. But as far as also finding godly community, I would say that piece really took off for me after I stopped playing softball and I started getting involved with ministry. Just finding people that were like-minded and rooted in their faith, but also people that were holding me accountable, which I think was a really big thing for me this summer, just pushing me spiritually, really emphasizing on areas of my life where I was struggling, even with things that I didn't realize that I was struggling with, if that makes sense. Just getting involved in ministry is where I found a lot of my core friends to this day, and obviously softball, so that's that's not really a guide, but yeah.
I would even say in my personal experience with college, I was lucky, and I'm sure that you got this experience as well, but you kind of got to tie both of those together, having the sport relationship and the ministry relationship. I know I was involved in a discipleship group that was through Athletes in Action. So, of course, I had some friends from my team that would go to that. So, of course, those friendships got a little bit more of a deeper connection than some of the other ones that were a little bit more surface level. But I was also able to have this community of other athletes who are going through some of the same things, but also were trying to find God in the midst of the struggles of being a college athlete, because it's a struggle. It's hard. Of course, you're looking at two people who had very unique experiences with our college sport, but even now being away from college and looking at what kind of friends I am probably still going to have in the next 5-10 years, a lot of them were the people that I was involved with in ministry or people that were at my discipleship group. I was telling Faith this just a little while ago, actually. I got a letter earlier today from one of the girls in my discipleship group. It's just so cute. Wrote in an open two-sided card, filled the whole thing, telling me about her life, what she's doing for spring break, asked me about Valentine's Day, where I'm reading in the Bible, and like a friend that does that is a friend that's worth keeping, and I never would have even knew her if it wasn't for ministry.
Yeah, I think that's huge. And I think that ministry in general, we're not saying like you have to get into ministry to find friends, to find godly relationships, but it is in those places where those people are, if that makes sense. Like if you're trying to find, we talk about this all the time, if you're trying to find someone to marry or a future spouse, you want to look in the right places, right? Like you're not going to find that person at the club or at the bar. I mean, you could, but like the majority of godly people are not hanging out in those areas. So likewise with godly friendships, joining, even if it's just like a Bible study group or a young adult group or anything like that, that's where you will find godly community. It's a really good step in the right direction, for sure.
But on that note, actually, I know that both Faith and I have kind of had these personal experiences where we had a friendship that you thought you were closer than you were maybe, or you were comfortable with being vulnerable, or I would say at least in my like most painful friendship breakup, it was a friend that I had been very vulnerable with in my walk with the Lord, whether that was she was a part of going to Young Life camps when I was younger, or being on softball teams growing up, or even just high school, because this was kind of like when our friendship filtered out. There's a lot of change, but you're also right in the midst of these really important changes in your life, and God is a big part of that. I think especially if you're going to young adults or youth groups and stuff at this age, that's a group that you're being very comfortable with the struggles that you're having. And this friend of mine, I'd grown up with her, so she knew everyone that I ever had a crush on and where my walk was with the Lord, my family dynamic. But I also was learning that she was not trying to build me up or fill my cup in the same way that I was trying to fill hers. And it was just constantly draining me. And it was kind of deceived because I was like, if she's been a part of my faith journey, then she has to be a friend that stays. She deserves to be a friend that stays. But that isn't necessarily the only criteria for a good friendship.
Yeah, and I would say another big thing, just like any relationship that you have, to be praying about that friendship and just over that person in general, because we've both went through friendship breakups and it's not fun and it's really hard, but also recognizing that you can still have their best interests at heart and still love them from afar. And sometimes that's what's best. And just deciding and knowing when the right time is to walk away, because I think it can be hard too, just being so involved with your faith. And if this is someone who has also been walking along in faith with you, just that vulnerability that you guys have with each other and being scared to let go of that friendship, even if it is the right thing to do. And that can be very intimidating and just feeling lost with how to handle that. And I know that I experienced that a couple times, and it can just be hard. And just knowing that you're not a bad person for letting this friendship go.
I have a question for you. In the same way of knowing that sometimes a friendship isn't growing you anymore, or it's not good for you to stay close to them anymore, you can also be in communities that aren't necessarily building you or being iron sharpening iron, but they still need Jesus. How do you navigate being friends with people who aren't in that place with Jesus that maybe you are, and evangelizing, but also just being a good friend they're not scared to approach?
We just talked about this. Yes. Was that Tuesday? Yesterday? Yeah. We were on a walk and we were talking about this. I think that can be hard. It can be hard to navigate friendships where either the other person is, and we're all always still growing, but the other person is kind of fresh in their faith, just getting into their faith. That can be really hard when you are trying to walk alongside them, but also not fall into sin or temptation with that. But also, like, knowing that's what we're called to do. Like, as believers, we're called to associate with people who don't know the Lord. And I think that one of the biggest things that we talked about was just kind of what I do to protect myself in those situations is I am very careful about who I'm super vulnerable with. That helps me when the thing that I have came across as an issue is that if I'm friends with someone, say they're just getting into their faith, when I get super vulnerable with them and I'm like, these are things I'm struggling with, then sometimes it can be taken as like, oh, well, like she's really strong in her faith and she struggles with that. So like I can struggle with that. Not saying that you can't, using that as a reason to like continue in that sin. That's something that I have really had to navigate the last couple years and just figuring out like, okay, how can I be a light for this person? And I want to be involved in their growth and I want to be involved in their journey, but also not causing them to stumble because of my own sin, if that makes sense.
You had said at the beginning that you're cautious with who you are vulnerable with. But we also talked yesterday about how important it is to have like your 3 good friends that you can be vulnerable with so that they can hold you accountable and so that you're not walking alone or feel like your struggles are alone. So how do you kind of go through picking that or just navigating friendships that way?
Yeah, I would say find someone who by their characteristics of their life, like the fruits of the Spirit, like the Bible talks about in Galatians, find someone whose life reflects their love for Christ. And I think that's something that's pretty easy to evaluate. And when you're entering, obviously everyone still struggles with sin. I still struggle with sin. You're never going to find someone who you're like, oh, that is the perfect person. And they exemplify Jesus to a T. But looking for the fruits of the Spirit in other people around you and being like, that is someone that I want to look like. I'm going to use you, for example. when I think about Megan and who she is as a friend and just who she is as a person, I'm like, she has characteristics that I want to embody better. She has characteristics of Jesus that I want to be more like, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? So like, that is something that I pay attention to, especially with like my close friends and just finding someone who I can be vulnerable with. I feel like what they show in their life and what they reflect is an easy way to determine where they are in their walk with the Lord. And granted, we're always going to be struggling and there's going to be ups and downs. So that's just a given.
And I couldn't tell you who said this, but I know a lot of people have heard that you're made up of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. Yeah. So especially if you're one of those people who kind of looks at friendship and evangelism, especially in places that need the Lord, like a college bar. Yeah. And it's obviously not that you want to completely avoid those places because those people still do need Jesus. But if you're spending more time at your college bar than you are with your discipleship friends, who do you think you're going to be more like? Right. And you need to be spending that time with Jesus and in the Word and with people, like you said, that embody the fruits of the Spirit so that you actually know how to represent Jesus in a place that is full of temptation, that's full of sin and full of misdirected good traits. That's what I was looking for. And also, we had also, again, mentioned this on our little walk the other day. Social media can be fake and you can kind of put off whatever vibe it is that you want to. Sometimes it makes you feel a little less comfortable with being vulnerable with someone. And even if that's someone that you love because of the way that you've construed yourself to other people, whether or not that's like being a discipleship group leader, you really want to look like your life is perfect and that you love the Lord and you're always posting these verses and talking about what you're currently reading in the Bible, whether or not you're actually actively pursuing it. Having a person that you can be like, you know what, I haven't talked about where I'm struggling in my relationship right now. So you actually talk to them about it and find that they've struggled with it too. It feels so much less alone. And when it's a person that can say, well, in the Bible, it says this, and it's not just you having to go find it or coming from a pastor, then it just feels so much less lonely in your walk. And it's just nice to know how to find those people, but also how to represent God so that you can find those people.
Yeah, I love how you say that too, because I think that it can be really hard, especially when you are involved with ministry and young life groups and whatever it might be, or just in general. It can be really hard to want to appear just like that you have it all together. But having friends that you can go to and be like, look, I'm really struggling with this, and they point you back to the truth, but they also really like, I get it. Because I think that that's something that I really struggle with, people pleasing. And it has been something that I have had to learn to let go of, because I find myself in places where I'm like, okay, I have to appear perfect, and I have to like look like I have it all together, and I have to constantly be like on my A game with my relationship with Christ. And it's like, that's not real life. Like, stuff happens. I go through days where I feel far away from God, and having friends where I can go to them and be like, can you pray for me, because I feel really far away from God right now. And they're like, I get it and I understand and I've been there. And they're not like, oh, you feel far away from God? Like, yikes, you know? I was trying to come up with something. But you know what I mean? Like, that they're not coming with you at you with shame or just like making you feel more guilty than you already do.
I loved that you said yikes, but I also love that you mentioned being willing to ask for a friend to pray for you, because we've talked about, I believe in our first episode, just the power of prayer and why it's so important in your walk with the Lord, and how much it doesn't only change, of course, your circumstances that you're praying about, but it changes your heart, and it can change, the hearts of people around you. I think if you're in that situation where you're wondering how to find a good Christ-centered friendship or where to look for them, wherever you find yourself coming to this podcast for answers, I would say just ask the Lord, and he always has a way of answering your question. Because your question can be, I have this friend, I don't know if there's someone that I should be vulnerable with, that I am comfortable talking about Jesus with. Can you give me some kind of answer here or clarity? And there's no way in telling exactly how he's going to answer, because he answers us all differently. He speaks to us all differently. I have friends who hear his voice. I have friends who can give a message in a discipleship group and they don't remember a word they said because the word was speaking through them. There's not a cut, clear stone way of, that did not make sense. There's not a clear cut, clear stone. There's not a clear cut answer for what that can look like, but nonetheless, if you ask the Lord in prayer for that answer, he's going to provide.
It's going to be embarrassing. So my senior year of high school, I was really struggling with community and friendships and just all of it, so much so to the point that I would go to lunch by myself, like genuinely by myself, and I would come home like in tears to my parents and be like, I have no friends, and they would be like, okay, yikes. He'd be like, why are you talking about this to us? But and that was actually something that was really hard, because I had walked through a little bit of friendship breakups my senior year, and that was really hard for me, just not having that community my senior year. And I prayed a lot about it. And it wasn't something that was like instant where I was like, okay, now I have 35 friends. You know what I mean? But coming around 2 years later, sophomore year of college, I still, to this day, don't have this huge group of friends. But I would say I have probably around 5 to 6 quality friends that I spend all my time with and that know me, like for me, and love the Lord. And that's something too I experienced a little bit at GCU and just in college is within the first couple weeks, you kind of feel like you have like 30 friends, but none of them know you beyond like what your name is and kind of like a little bit about you, if that makes sense. And so I really realized that deep into this semester is just that like I found who my core friends are and people who want to know about you and who value you as a person, and not just like oh, this is Faith. She's pretty cool. She is a transfer student, and that's about it. You know what I mean? Like people that are there to get to know you and who want to walk alongside you and support you.
I also would say the more that you grow up and experience life, because there's going to be ups and there's going to be downs, and you're going to ride highs and you're going to be in deep valleys, all the things. You can tell those quality friendships by how they respond to those events. And also, like high school friends, when you leave for college, who's still reaching out to you and asking about how you're doing, asking. I had one friend freshman year who I didn't talk to pretty much the whole semester. I didn't see her when I came home, and she's one of the people that I would have considered like a bridesmaid my senior year. And it was just, of course, really shocking, but especially when you're entering the college atmosphere and seeing how everyone changes, because Faith and I were talking about how everyone goes to college and gets the freshman 15. You get that, but you also, your soul just changes when you go to school. And a lot of people learn whether or not they're going to make God a priority. And a lot of people decide if they're going to make the bar and going out on the weekends, and they're finally old enough to download Tinder. And like, that's just what happens when you go to school. And seeing how those friendships kind of evolve and react to big life changes is a good way to tell if they're someone that's worth keeping around.
Yeah, and a little testament to that too, just friendships that grow with you, because I'm like, how many years has it been that we've been friends?
Like 5 now.
Like 5 years. Yeah. And when I first met Megan, I was not very strong in my faith, and we both are like 360 of a different person. And so that's something too to look for, just friendships that aren't there just like as a transactional thing, but friendships that are there to help you grow and support you throughout 5, 10 years, however many years you're gonna have that person in your life. But also, I think that there's a lot of friendships that are only in your life for a season and for a reason, and God uses that person for a purpose, and maybe it's you or maybe it's someone else, and that can be hard too, because you have the vision that this person's going to be in your life for the rest of your life, and then they're not, similar to like a relationship. Yeah. And that can be hard too, but just realizing that the Lord works all things together for those who love him, and he has a way bigger plan than you could ever imagine, and just trusting him with that. Because I think that if I could go back and tell myself that my senior year, when I was eating my lunch by myself and I felt like I literally did have no friends, just looking back and understanding that was for a purpose. And I feel like a lot of people go through a season of like loneliness.
And I would say not even does the world define quality friendship in numbers of how many friends you have and how many bridesmaids are standing behind you at your wedding and how many people tag you in their posts and that type of thing, because that's just not true to what friendship is. But also, in the same way that a romantic relationship is supposed to be easy, a friendship is supposed to be easy. And I'll use Faith then again as an example here. We've been friends now for 5-ish years or so, at least since we kind of started entering each other's lives. And there's never been an issue, even when we weren't necessarily pursuing the Lord together or talking about the Bible or even necessarily making the best choices on the weekends or in friends. Our relationship has always been easy. It's always, I know who I can call when something's wrong. I know who I can text and she's going to be there for me. And that's a whole nother way that you can judge what a good friendship looks like, and how to find one out there is just like your husband is supposed to be your best friend. Your friendship is supposed to be easy. It shouldn't constantly be a back and forth, and our friendship broke up and came back. But that's not to say that, just like you talked about chapters, how some people are supposed to be there in certain chapters of your life, sometimes the Lord will take a friend out of a chapter and bring them back, which I know that Faith has a whole testament to this as well, and being able to see that a friend was worth coming back. And where exactly did you get that gut feeling that it was right for that friend to come back?
Okay, yeah. So, one of my childhood like best friend, like we spent probably literally every waking second together. We went through a little bit of a friendship break my senior year, and we rekindled, I'd say probably about a year ago, a little under a year ago. And just knowing that that was a friendship that the Lord meant to come back, I think that something that really gave me peace about that is that it was so easy when we like picked things back up, and she was there for me, and I never had to second guess what her friendship meant to me. But and that sounds selfish, but it's also like, even as a friend, I always want to be the person that I would drop anything for my friends, and I want my friends to know that. And same thing vice versa. You want friends who, if you're going through something, they would drop whatever they're doing to be there for you, that you would do that for them too. And that sounds a little bit transactional, but that's not how I'm meaning it. But yeah, just knowing that she was meant to come back in my life because of her actions, and not just her words, but that she was carrying it out with her actions, and that even when she did come back and it had been like a couple weeks, that I knew that she would be there for me no matter what. And just praying through that too, and having peace, because I think that's another thing, that the Lord is not, he's not a God of confusion, he's a God of peace. And when you do pray about something, I feel like most people, which hopefully I'm not just speaking to myself, when I pray about something, I usually either get a feeling of like, I feel so at peace, or I'm like a little unsettled. And I think that's a very telltale sign that someone's not meant to be in your life, or someone is meant to be in your life.
And even your friendship break that you had, having this be in your senior year, when you mentioned, going to lunch alone and feeling that loneliness, now you're able to kind of see on the other side, even in your loneliness, you still found the Lord. Yeah. And without having that break of not having a best friend, you probably wouldn't have had that realization. Right. I had a time this fall where I'd never struggled with mental health ever before. And I was at the point where like it was hard to get out of bed every day. I wasn't showing up to class, and that was just not my character. It was not who I am. I was so confused on why that was being put on my heart and why I was feeling this pain. And I was in this new season of leading a discipleship group. So I was so frustrated that I couldn't feel the love and joy of Jesus, when it was my job to be telling everyone about the love and joy of Jesus. Yeah. And then I had a girl in my discipleship group talk to me after everyone else had left one night, talking about how she is facing depression, is having a hard time getting out of bed, isn't showing up to class, and she asked for my help. And had I not gone through that season of feeling that pain and being forced to turn to God because of my discipleship group, right, I wouldn't have known how to answer right that question. And who knows what my answer could have been, but I know that the reason why I had an answer and I wasn't afraid in that moment of those answers can mean life or death at this age. Of course it's sad and it's scary, but I felt confident in my answers because God had just walked me through that valley, and I knew how to get out of it. So I was like, I know you're going to too. If I could get out of that, so can you. And here's how I did. Here's the scripture I read. Here's how I brought Jesus into my everyday life. And I know that you can too. And even now, I'm sure I could be better about it, but checking up on her and being able to be like, well, I'm starting to feel low again. I wonder if she is too. Let me shoot her a message. Yeah. Of course, no one wants to go through a season of depression. No one wants to go through a season of loneliness. But sometimes, every time you go through something like that, the Lord is working through you. It's just really cool to be on the other side of that now.
I think that's really cool that you mentioned that too, just being vulnerable in that also, because you could have easily went to her and been like, oh, I've never struggled with that. Like, what are you talking about? You know what I mean? And I think that, like you said, it's life or death to be vulnerable in that moment and be like, yes, this is something I've struggled with, and this is how the Lord helped me through it, and this is how we're going to get through it together, because the Lord does use people to help other people. Like, truly, he does. I remember this summer, I had a super vulnerable conversation with this one girl about abusive relationships. And that was something that I touched on in the first episode, but that was really hard. That was a really hard season in my life, and I struggled with my relationship with God and just being mad and upset and not understanding why it happened. And then I met a girl this summer, kind of similar situation, and she was like, "Can you pray for me? I'm really going through some just abusive relationship stuff." And it opened up a door for me to kind of talk to her about what I've been through and just how I got through it and how the Lord is still good even though bad things happen, which is a whole nother topic. And it can be hard, yeah.
I think one of the coolest things God does is reveal himself after the fact.
Yeah.
Because there's so many people who will give the story of when you're not feeling the Lord, it's because it's the test, or you're not feeling the Lord because he's carrying you and not walking next to you. And I find that I have a lot more peace over my circumstance now because of how many times I've seen God pull through in the past. And actually at Ultimate Training Camp, I'm going to end up talking about this every episode, but at Ultimate Training Camp this summer, I was really on the fence about whether or not I was going to be quitting my sport because I felt like it'd be letting down childhood me, that it would be letting down my family, the coaches who believed in me. I just didn't want to fail anyone. And I knew that the Lord was still going to love me. It wasn't that question in my heart. It was just knowing I'm capable of this and I could get through it, but it's also destroying me in the process. And there was one sermon that we heard that week about a guy who explained that he got cut from his college basketball team his freshman year, but he still got to be plugged in through Athletes in Action for 4 years. And then after he graduated, he got asked to play on the nationals team for basketball.
It's so cool.
And it is amazing. But think about how much pain he felt those 4 years of, God, why did you take away my sport? Right. That was something that meant so much to me. And a lot of people express their love and relationship with the Lord through their sport. So then for God to take it away is so painful and frustrating. And then he got to go right back into it and now sees it wasn't because God wanted him playing basketball for 4 years. God wanted him to have his full time and attention devoted to evangelism and discipling these other student athletes. And he didn't understand that when he was walking through the trial, but then got to see on the other end, oh, that's why. And this guy had been in this car accident and was still facing a lot of just physical troubles, hasn't fully healed. And he said, I still don't know why God put me in this accident. I don't know why I haven't been healed, but I know I'm going to know. And I know that God is going to work with this circumstance. And I know we're walking a little bit away from friendship, but friendship ties into all of this, and friendship seasons and why you're friends with this person, why you meet this person. You're going to meet someone who's going to try and rip you away from the Lord. You're going to meet friends who are going to just pull you and pull you and pull you to Jesus. And you're going to meet people who have no connection to you, but you're going to drop one seed in their heart that is going to bloom, and you just don't know.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think too, just like you said, how God reveals himself after the fact. I think that's so prominent in friendships too. Just even being on the flip side of friendship breakups, God revealing himself after the fact of why that person was not in my life anymore, or why that person came back into my life, and all of the above. But it's just really cool to see too, because in such a broken world, there's just so many things that can still be used for good. And like you touched on sports a little bit too, just as both of us are not athletes anymore, even that was something that I thought my whole entire life was going to be. Like, I was like, ever since I started playing softball, I was like, I'm going to play college softball. That's what I'm going to do. That's what I was made to do. And God, whatever you have to say about it doesn't really matter. Quite frankly, that was my mindset. I was like, that's what is in the plan. And I remember my dad, my junior year, I was not committed. And all the girls I was playing softball with were committed pretty much within the first week that you could commit. And so that was something that was really hard for me because I was like, okay, well, most schools that I want to play at already have all their girls committed, and I was freaking out about it, and I would have like these mental breakdowns about it. And I remember one night I was sitting on the couch with my dad, and he was like, "Why are you crying?" And I was like, "Because I'm not committed yet." And he was like, "That might not be what God has for your life." And I was like, "No, I'm going to play college softball." And he goes, "I'm going to ask you a question and you're not going to answer." He goes, "Is God still good if you don't?" And I just sat there and I'm like, whew, that's going to sting. But it was so true because God is still good if I didn't. And granted, I did go play college softball and I'm not anymore. And just seeing the way that the Lord used that and flipped that around. And he was like, look, I'm going to give you this thing. And in a year from then, you're not even going to be doing it anymore. But like in my mind, that was all my world revolved around my entire life. And it's honestly sad looking back because I really did put it on a pedestal. Softball was my entire life. And taking that away, I quite frankly didn't even know who I was as a person. People would come up to me and be like, "So like, what do you do?" And I'd be like, so I don't know what to say anymore. Just seeing that the Lord does use that for good. Just like wonderful, talented athletes that are still playing the game. He still works through people like that too. I'm not saying like you have to quit your sport to like be used. But it is cool to see like something that I tied so tightly, like you couldn't rip that away from me if you tried. And God took it away. And I am 10 times happier now than I was before, which is crazy because in my head I would have been like depressed thinking about that.
There's such an expectation of what college and what college ball is going to give you. So then the process of getting committed, going on visits, and kind of planning out your future, there's just so much pressure on how college is going to play a part in that because everyone says that they met their husband at their college or their bridesmaid or the best times of their life were when they were in their sorority or whatever, because there's expectations everywhere of what college is supposed to be. And especially in the athlete world, and I don't know how it works really for other sports, but I know for softball, September 1st is this big deal. You like stay up till, yes.
I'm like staring at my phone.
You stay up late, you stare at your phone, midnight hits, and you're like, why hasn't UCLA called me? What was the point of going to that camp 4 years ago? Point being, you have so much stress and pressure about what level you're going to play at, what environment you're going to be in. I remember it was a must that I had to have palm trees at my campus. I ended up in Minnesota. Don't know how God took me there, but that was the other thing is I was dead set on being a college athlete. And I was like, this is how I'm going to meet my friends. You get thrown into a friend group. And that's what my college experience is going to be. And quite frankly, I hated college. I didn't like being there. I didn't like being away from home. I didn't like being in the cold. It was so hard to be positive about why God placed me there. But over half of my testimony now is all because of my time spent there, because it toughened me up like crazy and forced me to go to God when I never would have if I was still in my comfortable life that I had at home. If I would have not played college sports, and no hate to CSU, but gone to CSU and driven home every weekend, and I'm sure God still would have worked with that situation, but forcing myself to be in a harder position than I needed to, and watching and just letting go of the reins and letting God do what he wanted to do with me there, and then bringing me home when it was time for me to be done. I don't know why he had to bring me home the way he did, and that'll have to be a whole nother story. So please ask questions if you want to know that whole story, because I should honestly like vlog that on my channel, like that's a story you will not believe. But God is still good, even in that story, even in the way that we got to school. And so many of my, again, on this friendship topic, so many of my friends all now come from Minnesota. That was Minnesota. I totally said that in that accent. I don't know if you heard that. Minnesota, Norton, South Dakota, and that whole region. And I would have never honestly had a reason to go up there and meet those amazing people if it wasn't for God placing me there. So again, all in God's design, and he's going to get those people in your life that are supposed to be there.
Yeah, and I think that it's cool that you mentioned expectations, because I think with sports, with softball especially, the expectation to play college sports, and I'm sure this is for all sports, but there's such a pressure in our day and age that it's like, oh, if you're playing a sport through high school, you have to go play college. And I feel like from a really young age, it like instills that in your brain. You're like, I have to go play college. And kind of something that we were talking about the other day too is just that I really didn't take any time to pray about my decision on where I was going to go to college, and the Lord still worked through that. But I already was dead set on like, this is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to meet my friends. This is this, and that's the way it's going to be. And granted, that happened, not for long. And it's just cool that the Lord still worked through that and still was moving in that area of my life while I was still living a completely different lifestyle.
And of course, we're grateful that now we're here. And I love talking about friendship, obviously, with the two of us, because we've built a very good friendship. And honestly, starting this podcast and going through this has also brought us a lot closer together and a lot more comfortable with talking about Jesus together, which is such a blessing. So we're definitely glad with the way that God has turned that out as well. And we're just in a season of gratitude, I think, but also there's going to be some changes now coming in the future, which seems like a good time to bring it up. Unfortunately, Faith Ray is being called back to Arizona next week. So we're going to do our best to film a couple more episodes before she gets back, or before she leaves. We will be back here recording probably around May. So you'll be seeing some pre-recorded videos. But we still would love to hear what topics you want us to talk about, anything that you have questions on, anything that we brought up that maybe you don't agree with or want us to bring a little bit more of the Bible into it. I know that I kept thinking of verses to bring into this conversation today, and they just didn't come out. But sometimes that's not what God wanted y'all to hear, so it's just not how it happened. But we just want to, again, just put that out there that we want to make this a community. We want to hear what you all want us to be talking about, and of course be giving us any feedback for how our first couple videos are going.
Yeah, also maybe we can work out something, because I know we're going to try to film a couple more episodes. I'm literally just mentioning, I've never talked to her about this, so she might say no. But maybe if you guys would want us to, we could do like an Instagram live on our Boldly His Instagram page, maybe every once in a while. That way, once we have our pre-recorded videos, once they're already posted, we could pick a day and go live and just chat, and then you guys can comment or whatever, just to try to like get the weeks to go by faster. Yeah. I don't know if that would help, but yeah.
That's a great idea.
Hopefully the mic passing is not too annoying.
I know, I'm like, hopefully y'all are listening and not watching, because it's a little atrocious passing the mic. But
Soon.
Hopefully by tomorrow, honestly, or even whatever, we should have 2 mics. That'll hopefully be working. It'll be on our shirts and we won't be passing. But of course, that's not the most important reason why we're doing this. We're pushing through because we want to talk about Jesus. We know why it's important, and we want to make this work. So to kind of close out today, we just want to say thank you for watching our video. Make sure that you like, comment, share, follow, all the things. We have an Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. All of them are active now, getting some videos out there. If you're liking what we're talking about, be sure to post it and share it as we are growing this channel. And anything that you want us to hear or want to talk to us about, our DMs are always open. Our comments are always open. Let us know anything that you want to hear.
We love you guys.
Jesus loves you. So do we. Thank you for coming. Go out this week being bold.